So hey, Greg, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Yeah, doing okay, but
It's
it's
fun.
been a while since we see each other.
I know.
This,
I know.
yeah, this is
It's been since
yeah,
Christmas, before Christmas, I think.
yeah before
Yeah,
Christmas.
no,
So
it's
this
all
is
good. I was like I was saying, I caught a little bug of some sort, but getting through it. It wasn't anything significant, but I haven't been sick in a long time. But
well, people at your age need to be careful about what they catch.
of course they do. Yes, but I understand that you don't have to worry about that kind of thing.
No, I do. I was we had I got sick too. We had I don't know. It was started with a sore throat and whatever. I didn't, but we were traveling at the time too. So, but we had a good Christmas. We went down to Las Vegas and picked up my father-in-law, and then drove to L.A. for a family wedding. Our niece, his granddaughter, was getting married, so
Oh,
it was kind of a whirlwind week that we had there from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve. So, but
so busy.
yeah, it was
And
it was always
how is Los Angeles these days? You know, it's been like 25, 30 years since I've been there.
really that long. I don't know. We were. It's still big. Still lots of people there. Freeways are still nuts.
Yeah.
But it's nice. We like going there. My Sonia's brother lives in a little town called Diamond Bar, and it's outside of L.A. It's just on the probably the eastern border of Los Angeles County, on the way out to Palm Springs and Riverside. So it's nice to go there because you're not right in the throes of everything
Yeah.
until you get out on Highway 10 or a Freeway 10 and or Freeway 60 in rush hour, and then that can be kind of scary, kind of frightening, but it's all good.
Yeah, I remember when I was there traveling the highway before we drove down into Mexico. It was just brutal. I thought, and they say that Toronto 401 series highways are way more busy in the whole world.
Really?
They're the busiest in the world.
Yeah. Well, how many lanes do you have there? I remember driving through Mississauga one time, and like it was just like a concrete jungle. Like that's all there was just this huge,
Yeah.
huge
Well,
freeway.
the highway there is 6 lanes.
Yeah.
6 lanes. You know, you've got your express side and you've got your collectors. They're usually three and three, six, sometimes it's 7 or 8. But I mean,
Yeah.
they're packed. It's just absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely not. It's just brutal,
But that's
unbelievable.
that's it. That's the environment we live in, right? That's the environment that happens, and you know, uh, people live there. Like, how does that driving in that environment and driving in those rush hours every day, right? Because that's for a lot of people. That's what they do every day. They go out and they get on that freeway and I mean, it must like I've never had to do that. Commute, have that kind of a commute. My commute is like walking from my bedroom to my office, so it's it's pretty easy. That's my environment. And
Yeah, yeah. No, well, I can tell you, I used to do that crazy, crazy drive. I had my first business in Toronto, so I used to have to scoot all over the place, and you just kind of time it when you make your appointments around when the heaviest traffic, like around that. But and then later on, when I was in the boating world, the yacht business, I had to drive 2 hours to get to my office, which is
2 hours,
crazy. Yeah,
two
it
hours.
was an hour and a half. It was basically my day was probably 4 to 6 hours long in driving alone. So you learn how to do work while you're driving.
So
Yeah,
that was your environment. That brings us to our topic of today, right? I mean, we're talking
yeah,
about the law of the environment, and
yeah,
John Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, it says, the law of environment explores how the people and surroundings we choose to be in impact our growth. So we
yeah,
choose to have that kind of an environment, when we're commuting. and
It's
how does that
unhealthy.
impact? Yeah,
I mean, I
well,
could tell you that that's a great lead into what we're going to talk about today because that was so unhealthy for me, that kind of an environment. Driving basically 4, 6 hours sometimes a day in Toronto. And I lived up north, which was a cottage country, basically. I had a farm there. And I would drive that commute well, not every day. I would drive it probably 4 or 5 days a week. It was brutal. No
so you
wonder
were
I had a
so
heart attack.
you were the country boy coming into the big city. Eyes
Well,
like saucers.
not quite, but no, I lived in the city when I was younger for a long time. I had a house, my first house I bought down there, and I had my first business.
So
And
you were used to it.
I was used to it, but it honestly, it was, I don't know, maybe 15 years later, having to do that after leaving the city to move to the country. And then having to do it 15 years later, it was madness. It was worse than it was. I'd say the congestion and the issues of driving had tripled. The worst. It was just the worst. But regardless, getting back to our topic, these are the kinds of environments that I think we have to sort of look at and analyze for ourselves, right?
Yeah, really. When you're in sales, everything impacts your attitude, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
if you're in an environment that is not conducive to a positive attitude, like, and I like, if you're going on a, if you have like, okay, in Abbotsford here where I live, I'm about 50 miles from Vancouver. Occasionally, I would have had to go into a meeting in downtown Vancouver, and if I commuted by car, I have that anxiety of driving through Vancouver rush hour, which seems like it's getting worse all the time. Like when you used to be able to at least drive to Surrey before you hit traffic. Now it's traffic from Chilliwack, which is farther east than us. But you have that anxiety of making that drive all the, to get into your appointment, and then you have to, you have to flush it all out and get ready for it. So having to commute or that kind of thing is significant. I think in affecting our anxiety levels, and our anxiety levels affect our attitudes. Um, but I think moving away from the idea of traffic and of that kind of type of an environment. What is a regular environment for a sales professional? What would be what how important is it, their regular environment, like your regular sales environment? How important is that for you to be aware of?
Well, I think it's the influence of your environment or growth is significant. I mean, just sort of put it into context here. It's your association. That's one of the things that John Maxwell talks about is suggesting that growth is influenced by the people that you surround yourself with. And I remember my very very first job. It wasn't a sales job. Like I'm talking real job where I was working in an office in Toronto and all that kind of stuff. And I was a bill collector. And
That's a fun job.
you know, it's sales. Trust me, it's sales. You have to convince people that they need to pay their bills. But the work environment I was in was atrocious. Like it was draconian. It was draconian, just like it was the worst of the worst. You had quotas, your name was on a board in front of the whole room, and there was like 40, 50 people that worked in this one office room. It was a 20-story building, and you were basically chastised if you didn't hit your quotas and called out in front of the whole room. And that kind of environment is awful to try and they thought that back then in the late 80s, early 90s, I guess the attitude was you live in fear, you'll do better. you know, so many people talk about self-esteem issues. I lasted a year. Like I stuck it out for a year until I found a job that was way better. But I mean, talk about 180-degree better. Like they weren't calling you out, swearing at you, and telling you you were worthless because you missed your quota by $10. It was brutal. But that's just an example of the environment that you're working in. So you're either, it's like slave labor, as far as I'm concerned. You either do it or you lose your job. And at that time, I had to really be careful because my wife and I were together. We just had a child, and I needed to work. And that's all there was to it. So you kind of put up with certain things and do what you have to do to survive. But it was awful. That's significant. I mean, if you're in a place, Don, where you're nurtured as far as supported, trained properly, given the tools and the resources to do your job, and work with people who are encouraging, goes a way long way of having a much more successful career and being happy. And that comes down to the environment shapes your attitude. So if you're in a negative toxic place, you're going to be a negative toxic person, and you're going to tend to, if you're a salesperson and that's happening, you're going to be pushing an aggressive sales process in order to get people to buy from you. You're not going to be uh, trying to get to know them as much as you are trying to push them to buy something that they may or may not want. That's how I sort of see it. So you have to nurture a leadership, um, you know, encouraging atmosphere in order to get the job done. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's. I was going to say when you had to move on from the bill collecting, it wasn't. You said you moved to a 180 job that wasn't selling the vacuum cleaners at that time. Then
No, the vacuum cleaners was before that job. I went from bad to worse.
well, so what type of things should a person or would a person want to be aware of when they're considering their environment?
Well, I mean, if environment shaping is shaping your attitude, uh, you want a positive, encouraging environment that grows, that has a growth mindset. Leading that helps you create a resilience, and it also helps you want to take on challenges and do better for yourself when you have that growth mindset. A negative, toxic environment may lead to a fixed mindset and hinder your ability to adapt and learn from setbacks. That to me is just obvious, right? You go to a growth mindset, an encouraging, positive environment. That's where you're going to excel. I think that's where you're going to be successful.
So you need positive people around you. You need encouraging people around you, um,
Motivating people, skilled.
motivating, and you need an environment where you can be successful. You have to be able to see your success, I would think. One of the things I think we also need in our environment is some level of accountability. Because without accountability, we don't have anything to measure.
That's
Um,
right.
I think. How about physical environment? What's your thoughts? I mean, I'm thinking about physical environment because it's the new year, right? So a lot of people, uh, maybe not a lot of people, but some people are going to think about making changes in their life, and that's what we do in the new year. And I did that. And part of what I did was I wasn't happy with the way my office was set up, and that's kind of how I organize myself. Sometimes I realize that when I need to shift things to a different level or shift things differently, what I quite often do is I reorganize my physical environment.
Yeah.
So I've actually changed it around. You may notice that my background is different, and that's because for this call, um, it's not my environment isn't the best because I have to sit on the off to the side a little bit to to make sure that I look like I'm looking at you. Because anyway, but physical environment has a lot to do with it, because if you're not in a good physical environment, you're not going to be comfortable. So you're not going to be able to perform either.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think there's a lot of pieces to a puzzle here that need to be in play. I never used to be, how should I put this? I was never so detailed that I would organize. I mean, I had my things organized and set up so that I did my job effectively, but they'd get pretty messed up and I wouldn't care. But now, as I've gotten older, I realize that there's a certain amount of chaos that comes with unorganized. If you're just unorganized, like your desk, your process is unorganized. That's how I find it. I want to when I'm on a call or when I'm doing something, I want to know where everything is. And that now a lot of the times now we're not doing so much paper as we are on the computer. So you have files, you know, filed in the right place. I just like to be organized now, just simply because I don't want to dilly dally. If you do that, then you put things off because you can't find them, and then you put them off, and then you don't want to deal with it because you get procrastinating, yada yada yada. I think it's important that you're organized in your mind and you're organized in what you're doing. I'm not saying you have to have everything in a certain place and it's got to be perfect and the towels have to be lined up on the rack and all that kind of stuff. All I'm saying is know where everything is when you're doing your work.
Yeah, that makes me think about this weekend. I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to do a virtual open house of a property. It's a kind of a recreational property, and I was thinking I don't do that very often, so I have to go back and think, okay, what's my process? What kind of environment am I going to set up so that it actually works? Because I want to be able to display the property properly without actually even being there. Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, so it's understanding the environment that I have to work in there, and understanding where I put everything. I thought it was funny when you mentioned knowing, being organized on your computer. And sometimes I save something and then I can't remember where I saved it.
Oh, I just went through that this morning. No, I just went through that this morning, and I was first. Then I remembered that
Yeah,
I actually made a file for it,
yeah, yeah. Or
and I found it.
yeah, that's actually something I think that's very important for people. That's just an aside, but to have a proper naming convention of your files, know where you save things, But maybe part of my problem is I try to save everything, so I turned out to be a hoarder on my computer. So I'm always running out of storage space. Anyway, we digress. But I guess that's all part of our environment, though, right? So what's your most conducive environment uh, to success? What would you if we have people, we have to have people in our life, the right people. We have to have the right circumstances. Circumstances we can't control, so we have to have the right attitude. Is that part of our environment? Is our attitude part of our environment?
It's huge.
Is it a product of our environment, or is it actually
Can be.
yeah,
I think Maxwell talked about this in the book about who you associate with.
yeah,
And I think that has a lot of relevance to our attitudes because suggesting that when you suggest that growth is influenced by people you surround yourself with, in a sales environment, when you look at that, being surrounded by, and we talked about this briefly, motivated, skilled, and positive individuals, that's where you can get a lot of inspiration. And quite frankly, that can elevate your performance, I think.
yeah.
But the same thing can happen if you're with negative or unmotivated people, right? So I think that's a huge thing.
We had
Association.
I think different personality types are motivated different ways. So the D type of personality is motivated by the competition as well. So if you're in a competitive environment, some people are going to excel at that and other people aren't. Some people don't excel in a competitive environment. You know talking about who you're with. We had this one guy in our office, and uh, did you ever? I'm gonna date myself, but do you remember that old cartoon that was Gulliver's Travels?
No, I think that was before my time.
No, it wasn't. But anyway, there was this cartoon on TV. It was based on the book Gulliver's Travels,
Yeah.
and there was this one guy on there that it was nothing worked. You know, like it was everything. You know, it'll never work. You know, we'll never make it. You know, like this is going to end in disaster. You know, everything was negative. And we had one of those guys in our office one time, and it was like, you know, the market was bad, this was bad, nothing was working right for him. And it was like, you know, like, why do I want to spend time with this guy? He actually, I was sharing an office with him, and it was I finally went to my boss, or uh, you know, at the time, and I said, you know, could I have a different office? I said, I don't care where I go. I just said, you know, this guy, he's a nice guy, you know, but I can't listen to his negative attitude all the time. It just, you know, was getting me down. And when I made that change, it was, you know, it was for the better. My production, you know, went up quite a bit, you know, and he eventually ended up getting out of the business. But who we're with is really, and who we work with is a big part, I think, of our environment, and understanding, you know, who they are and how they communicate. I think it will help you you know, establish your environment and work more effectively in your environment.
Yeah. I think that's huge who we associate with. Now, I mean, we can get into situations where we're leaders and we're going into a situation where there's negativity. It's our job to change that the best way we can, and we've got to lead by example. And I think that, you know, how to create a growth oriented environment comes down to, you know, a lot of factors, but I think you really have to have a clear vision and a purpose as to what you want and what you for yourself. And if you're not the leader or the person in charge, then even for yourself, you need to have a clear vision and purpose. But as a leader, you do as well. So I think these are important discussions.
Yeah, it is important. I think being aware of you know, what is included in your environment as well. You know, because we can sometimes, and what we can change and what we can't change. But yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on with this topic that Maxwell sort of covers in that chapter. But you know, I think in the end, we just have to be vigilant about what we want and where we're going with it, who we're associated with, and if you get into a situation where you're in a toxic environment, you've got to change it. If you can't change it, then you got to change your situation. You have to be willing to change, like you did, where you said, you know, you were dealing with this guy. Maybe you tried to get him on a positive uh, slant, and it didn't work. You came to the point where you had to make a change. It was you weren't going to quit, but you were going to make a change as to where you were going to be sitting your butt for the next 6 months because you couldn't stay with a toxic person, and that's the smart thing to do. Now, a lot of people don't like doing that, but the reality is simply this: what do you want more? You want a more successful career, or you want to be in that growth mindset, or do you want to stay and listen to somebody who's toxic and negative?
yeah, yeah. You know, I should say that that individual, he went on to do a different career, and was very successful. You know, so just maybe he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time too.
Well,
So
that's right. We never. This is the other thing that people don't understand too. They get pretty upset by other people, but the reality is simply this: we don't know what's going on in other people's
yeah,
lives. You know, we try and get to know them to build rapport and trust so that they tell us, you know, if they're in trouble or whatever. But, you know, a lot of times we don't. You know, there might be something going on in their life that is is really changing their attitude. And we have to be cognizant of that, I think. We have to start to understand other people, and more we and we've talked about this, the more we understand others, the more we start to understand ourselves. And if you can, and I don't know, I'm this way. If I can help somebody change their attitude or shape their future, I'll take that opportunity to do that. It's just understanding what's going on in other people's lives.
Yeah, taking the time to listen to them.
Yeah, which I think is very important for a sales career.
Well, yeah, yeah.
You
If
know,
you're not listening to someone, you're going to have a hard time relating to them and being effective in
that's
helping
right.
them.
That's
So,
right.
well, there's lots of things we could talk about with the environment, but I think we have to look at the environment of our mind. We have to look at the environment of our associations, who the people in our life. We have to look. I think we have to look at our physical environment as well, and what like is are there any things that, and recognize what is holding you back, and take make a checklist. Say what is it about where you're working that you like, and what is it that working about what you don't like, and have you had success um, where you're at? What would make it better? And continually evaluate your environment, and that way you can make the appropriate changes, and maybe sometimes you got to decide to move on or make a slight change. But environment is pretty key, I think, in making sure, or in helping us to be successful. Nothing ensures your success. I mean, you can be in the best environment possible and still not be successful if you have a lousy attitude.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%.
So anyway, thank you, Greg, for your insight. And I don't want to cut this short. If you have something else you think is important to say or appropriate to say, you might just want to say whatever.
I no, I think we covered everything. I mean, there's a lot. This subject you can go on for a very long time with it, but I think we basically covered the important parts of it. So I'm good.
Yeah, I would like to encourage people to buy the book, John Maxwell's 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. It's a great book. It's an easy read, and I think that it'll help you in your growth and help you move forward. So, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.